does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
WESN.
Welcome, I'm sure Michael Small. This is Talking Point at WESN, the content capital, from our studios in Woodbrook. And as I said, it's great to be back. It's easier to do the show here. I'm not necessarily well versed at doing the show remotely. At one point I did take over equipment but depending on the length of stay, you know, it's the logistics behind it, was it worth the effort per se? At the end of the day, this is not looking good points, this is talking points. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about this morning, we should have our media ambassador later, as normally when he can't make it on a Monday, he'll carve time out for us on a Tuesday as he's done before. But before we have him, I want to speak about perception, how we perceive things, how we perceive the narrative of the current events that are important to us, right? And it's not limited to the politics and the economy and crime, because you could potentially look at various examples in your everyday life to find quirks or interesting facets of how you perceive the world around you and how it affects your behavior. So I said yesterday I forgot my morning coffee. I have that today. My morning coffee is very important to me. I guess I wouldn't say I'm a caffeine addict, but it's one of those things in the routine that helps me feel comfortable. Just having that bit of caffeine before the show, it helps me feel a little bit more awake and aware and vibrant. It's not necessary, right? I don't necessarily need it. I didn't have it yesterday morning. But if I don't have it, I feel a certain way. It's similar to this. My water. There are many mornings I also bring it with me on set in case I need some water, in case my throat gets dry, as it did yesterday. I normally don't show myself drinking on camera, but yesterday, when taking calls, there was no cutaway, and my throat was too dry. I had to take a sip of something. But one of the interesting things about my water is I could carry it around in certain situations and not drink from it at all. More often than not, if I have my coffee, that's what I'll be sipping on when I'm here on a show trying to find a moment off camera to take a sip. And the water will just be there most of the time. I'll have the water, because it's a covered cup, I don't have to worry about dust settling on it. I'll have it next to my bed in case I want something to drink, and I don't have to get up, go out to the kitchen and go through all of that. That tends to wake me up a little too much and I may have trouble falling asleep. I want water right next to me in case I need it. I might have it next to me on my desk when I'm at my computer. And I don't always drink from it. I might have it with me in the car. In fact, I normally do have it with me in the car. And I don't always drink from it. Because there's a funny thing about perception. When I don't have it, somehow that's when I'm thirstiest. That's when I feel the thirst most aggressively building up. But is it physical need for hydration, or is it a psychological thing where the absence of it now makes it more stark, more grave? I'm more concerned. I don't have water and I'm thirsty, and what am I going to do? And I could be technically, seemingly in similar conditions with the water, and I'm all right, because it's there whenever I need it. Perception is a funny thing psychologically. Now, on some level, let's go bigger picture now with regards to quirks of perception. We generally tend to look at political situations and assume corruption. Let's be frank. And we tend to look at political situations and we assume that both parties will be antagonistic against each other. Now, the PRM, there was a story yesterday where they were having issues getting a venue for the annual convention. And they immediately started to complain about politics of revenge, politics of retribution, petty politics at its lowest. This is from the chairman, Marvin Gonzalez. And it's easy to assume that to be true, to assume that to be the case. But as someone who has been in the amateur musical space in TNT, I know just enough to know that if you're trying to book Queen's Hall, you can't book Queen's Hall so soon to November and expect to get a specific date that you might need in November. You might be able to get a date somewhere around October, November, maybe, but to say that you want a specific date. Now, they say that they made the request on June the 12th. Depending on the situation, that might be too late. I'm not entirely sure if the PNM is accustomed to having their conventions in concert halls, but I do know this. November, October, December gets booked well in advance. In fact, the article says that, this is a quote, you can't come to book a thing 2 months before, or, you can't book today for tomorrow, right? And I believe it went on to say, many of the performing, this is from an anonymous source. The previous quote, I believe, was from someone working in Queen's Hall. But an anonymous source said, many spaces at the venue are booked as much as a year in advance. This is with regards to Queen's Hall. adding that performing arts venues are now earning their keep. I'm not too sure if I agree with that last part. That might put too much of a burden on the performing arts spaces. But generally speaking, I haven't necessarily heard anything about them folding. Queen's Hall is always busy at that point in time in year, because if you've been to any of the shows during Christmas time, you probably got wind of the fact that not only is it whichever show you went to, all three of the traditional choirs, plus other newcomers but big names, have their shows around that time. We're talking Love Movement, potentially Lydians, but definitely Marionettes, right? Love Movement and Marionettes will have it in Queen's Hall. I believe Lydians also has it in Queen's Hall, I'm not sure. And then of course there's Brian McFarlane and John Thomas. And that's just the annual big names. Now, they don't always have it at Queen's Hall, but there's an expectation that the shows will happen. And there are only so many dates, so many weekends, because essentially those shows take the full weekend. And you can't have the shows too soon, because will the show be ready? You can't have it in September. You can't have it in August. You can't have it in early October. All of these Christmas shows want to have it in November, early October for the earliest, and then early December for the latest. So that's a small window of about 2 months. And that does not include any of the other performing arts groups that I might not even know about myself, because I'm not that well connected, right? So while the person from Queen's Hall said you can't book the thing 2 months or so before, it was said they requested the booking on June the 12th, and you might think that's far out enough. That's month 6, you're booking approximately 5 months in advance. No, that might not be enough. I know that for choirs, they might be looking at their dates maybe in March or February or January. And one of the tricky things is you have to potentially commit to a date before, but even necessarily you might not have a show ready to go, because you're now coming off of the Christmas season when considering next year's show. And everybody wants to relax, at least for some of these endeavors. They are amateur choirs or second jobs. In the case of Brian McFarlane and John Thomas, they might get paid, but it's still not their day job, and it's still not a living wage professional gig in that respect, as far as I'm aware. So it's a lot. And Queen's Hall understands this, and to the best of their ability tries to facilitate it, but the schedule is the schedule. And more often than not, that point in time in the year will be booked up extremely fast. Now, with regards to Napa, Sapa, and other venues, I am less certain. So I don't know necessarily how those things goes. I would imagine that given what was said, that the performing arts are now, the venues are now earning their keep. Again, it's Christmas time, so all of those venues might be in high demand. And I say that to say this, and note, this is coming from The Guardian, a paper that some will assume, for potentially good reasons and bad, to have some kind of degree of bias against the government. But note that even if that's the case, they did reach out to try to get at least the writer of this article and the editor approved and published it, to try to get alternative explanations and not just take the political explanation at face value. Because the perception is that it would be easy to say it's politics. It's petty politics at its worst. When the reality is, this is how things are with regards to scheduling limited performing spaces or limited concert halls, stages, etc., that has that kind of seating, because it's not just performing arts that would use these venues. This is a political party looking to have its convention. And here we have an article basically looking at people who are most directly tied to the industry, getting an alternative explanation from Queen's Hall itself, I believe, and then one from the, I won't say industry, but I guess you could say performing arts industry, who most often utilizes the space, books out the space at that point in time of the year. And even if they didn't have that, I was prepared to say it because I know that's how it's been for, I think, 2 decades potentially. And there's no reason to assume that's going to change anytime soon. And Queen's Hall doesn't show favorites, by the way. If you're of performing arts groups that performs in November every year and you're too late, tough luck. They'll take the booking and whatever deposit requirement they have. They're not going to necessarily show favorites to those who are always there every year. So there's no favoritism as far as I'm aware involved. And at times, if you're not diligent with your booking, then you have to figure out some kind of alternate arrangement. So it's not always what we're going to assume it to be. Not everything in this country is due to petty politics. But part of the problem was it would be easy to perceive not just that it was petty politics, but unfortunately, given what we've seen from this government, we've seen some degree of petty politics from this government. We've seen some degree of petty politics from PNM. That's why I said, you would just assume it to be true on both sides, but not everything has to be with that explanation. Unfortunately, not everything allows for the transparency, at least up front, that has potentially clarified this situation for us. Right now, former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley is asking the government, well, how many citizens have they recommended to the United States for the revocation of visas or reported to the United States on our citizens in order for their visas to be revoked? And then he used himself and Stuart Young as an example, saying they have called for, explain the grounds for why his visa and Stuart Young's visa was called to be cancelled. Now, this is Dr. Keith Rowley making a claim, and just off of the headline, off of the report, I have not dug deeper into it, because my point is not to say what is the truth or what is not the truth. I'm not entirely sure if we have all the relevant information in the public sphere. But my point is, people will see this article and they will make the assumptions one time, for better and for worse. Because we assume political persecution on some level. There were people who were concerned about that with the PNM administration. When certain areas of the public sector were moving too slow, there were the questions, am I being targeted? When certain people were not up for government contracts, not necessarily PNM sycophants or UNC supporters, sycophants, but just normal everyday people. Like now, it's happening now as well. You ask, am I being politically targeted? Sometimes the answer is no. The public sector bureaucracy moves slowly. Or in the case of immigration, there might be examples of potential corruption. Alleged. That's why I said potential. And this is a situation where the Prime Minister said, I think the US State Department's news release is self-explanatory, when the paper went to her asking for response to Rowley's statement. And now we get to another area of perception. Because when America was thanking Trinidad and Tobago for directly assisting in the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the Prime Minister attempted to deny. Now she's saying, well, look, their news release is self-explanatory. Which one is it? Do we listen to the Americans or do we listen to you? Which one is more pertinent? And why does it feel as though we perceive the Prime Minister as putting all this effort to align herself with America, and then we have situations where, on some level, she can't answer questions? Because even with regards to the direct aid we gave the Americans, she's denying it, but she's not necessarily denying it fully. She's just saying our military did not do anything, was not involved. National security is more than just military arms. And let's go to another level of perception. And the thing is, with regards to the situation with the US visas and our involvement with Nicolas Maduro's capture, apprehension, or him being apprehended, part of it is not what actually happened, but rather how it was explained. And the lead up to those explanations, with all the song and dance about what the radar was for and what the radar wasn't for, and the mixed messages we had with regards to that, and the fact that some of the explanations didn't technically make sense, and they didn't fill in the details to help it make more sense, to take us from where the explanation was to what the reality turned out to be. And they left a lot of gaps, and it allowed people to perceive the situation more and more negatively, regardless of what the truth was. And the opposition was able to utilize that to some extent to call out the radar, or at least they attempted to. And at the end of the day, I don't think most people thought, oh, the radar's fine, there's nothing to see here, everything's okay. No, it was a unique situation outside the norm that did not have sufficient explanation, so it caused people to get nervous. And I was simultaneously trying to get people to lower their stress levels and not just work themselves into a frenzy without enough information, while still having my own questions on the official explanations. Things like that then causes your perception on the capacity to trust a public entity or a public speaker. Let's not say entity, because that means public sector. No, I mean anything that operates within the public, that communicates to the public, that is a leading figure and voice of our society. Any public figure. When you have inconsistencies, now your perception of them starts to formulate differently. There's only so many inconsistencies you can take before your trust starts to wane. The only difference is UNC supporters have a higher threshold of trust than moderates. And of course, PNM supporters, the most biased against, will have the lowest. They're quick to assume the worst once that minimal threshold is reached for them to be distrustful of the entire situation. But a lot of it comes down to not necessarily what is. I have my cup of water. All of a sudden, I'm not as thirsty. Not because I drink from it, but because it's next to me. If I don't have it, all of a sudden, psychologically, I feel more thirsty. I'm more stressed out about not having my water. The what if gnaws at my head, gnaws away at my psyche. The lack of communication, it doesn't matter what is. It's how we perceive the situation, and it allows us to be stressed out, whether we want to or not. The commissioner, his emergency leave is apparently not in breach of protocol. He got permission from the Police Service Commission. Now, I understand that his emergency leave could be personal, and there are limits to the explanation you can give. But the problem is not what is, but how it's perceived. Because this might seem minor to you, but I'm telling you, with regards to public communications, sometimes it's these little subtle differences that make a world of a difference. Because this is the scenario. The Commissioner of Police is not here. He's on emergency leave. I'm not entirely sure if we got that news from an official press release, because we're under state of emergency. And on some level, we might not have been fully aware that the Commissioner has left the country. Apparently, we did not know if he got authorization to do so or not, and we did not know who was acting in his stead. And based on the situation with Gary Griffith, it seems as though there's a court ruling that says an acting Commissioner of Police, usually the assumption would be in a more long-term capacity when you're in between commissioners, but even for something like this, apparently needs cabinet, I think it's Parliament approval. So I understand that given the time frame of the situation, it might not make sense. And of course, we're in August. I believe Parliament is on a break, right? So I understand that it's not practical. I don't necessarily agree with Guy Griffith when he says that they're all of equal ranks. He should know that in a military service, and I assume this to be true in police service as well, maybe it's not, but I know in military service, two people of equal rank, you determine seniority based on time and grade. If I've been a captain longer than you've been a captain, I am technically more senior. I was promoted earlier. So now, of course, the question is DCP Benjamin, has he been a DCP longer than the others? If he has, and if the police recognizes that officially, then we're fine. But it's not necessarily about what is, it's about what's perceived. And what's perceived is, well, the commission is not here during a state of emergency. And they didn't want to tell us. That's how it comes across. They didn't want to have to explain. They were kind of, this is how it comes across. That decision makers just wanted it to go under the radar. And if nobody realizes, then it's going to be fine. It's not going to matter when he comes back. But somebody did notice. And the thing is, you can't, if it's a personal reason, or if it's a sensitive national security reason, although he's Commissioner of Police, so I don't necessarily know why he would need to leave our borders for a national security reason. Something like that would most likely be more suitable for a member of the ministry or some other service to do so. But all you had to do is give us the basics. Go through the motions. When you don't go through the motions, psychologically people are going to say, why didn't you go through the obvious list of things you do in a situation like this? The commissioner wants emergency leave. So then once his leave is granted, an announcement is made, the commissioner of police has requested emergency leave, which has been approved. So as such, so-and-so will be acting in his stead. Might not officially be the acting commissioner of police, but Junior Benjamin will be acting in his stead as the most senior officer. He will oversee the police service until he returns. The commissioner of police requested emergency leave, let's assume for personal reasons. So as such, we respect his personal privacy at the time, and we cannot necessarily divulge any of that information. You put that release out there, and now things seem a lot more above board. Yes, the people who are biased against, they'll just look to nitpick. But now it doesn't look like you're trying to hide his absence. Now it looks like you're trying to be above board. Yes, some people might say, oh, that's convenient, personal reasons. And again, I'm putting that assumption in there for the sake of argument. Because personal reasons could be a smokescreen to cover up whatever the real reason is. But that's a wall that is harder for us to get through. That's for harder for critics and people biased against the commission and government to push beyond, right? Because it's, while incomplete, reasonable in the circumstances outlined. He has a personal issue, he needs emergency leave to deal with it. It apparently is serious enough that the Service Commission will grant him personal leave. What else are we supposed to say? But they didn't do that. And again, you're not giving out details, but you're going through the motions. You're doing the expected, the bare minimum to communicate to the public. Because, make no mistake, the absence of the Commissioner of Police is not going to be some clarion call for criminals. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, he's not here. Look how much laws we could break now. You know, he's not going to be the difference between successful policing on the ground or not. And then, of course, this is where the critics can potentially say, he makes no difference at all, to be honest. The Punisher patch notwithstanding, he's not actually the Punisher. He doesn't actually have the capacity to go out in the night, you know, by himself with an arsenal in his trunk to go intervene in violent crime and strike fear in the hearts of the criminals out there. That's not what he does. He sits behind a desk, at times says things he shouldn't say, and hopefully does not make too many bad decisions, but we don't know. So his absence on some level really and truly is neither here nor there, at least on a short-term basis when it comes to the practical realities of crime. But when you don't necessarily want to explain it up front, it looks as though you have something to hide, and then it makes it feel as though I don't have my water, so I'm more thirsty. Because now I start to panic. Why is the commissioner not here? Why is the commissioner not here while we have a state of emergency? This can't be good, right? It can't be good because obviously they don't want to explain it. They know it can't be good. All of this is tricks of perception. All the while, there is a situation, 7 police officers arrested in connection to the disappearance of 3 firearms have all been released. We have ongoing issues that the commissioner has been absent for. He's been speaking to the public less and less. It seems his position is a public one, almost as, if not just as public as an elected official. And he has to suffer many of the same negatives of that. He has to be wary of many of the same pitfalls and traps. One of the, as I've mentioned this before, you see this with politicians. They talk to the media, and then eventually they say enough things that the public finds either foolish, reprehensible, or that the public vehemently disagrees with, and they start to talk less, and less, and less. And then they disappear. Ron Sinner, as Minister of Works and Transport, I believe, was an example of that on some level, right? Faris Awari, once he got into local government, was to some extent like that as well. On some level, you look at some of the ministers now. I forget we have a Minister of Justice. I don't even know why he has a salary, to be honest. What does he do? Someone please explain it to me. Is he in charge of prisons or not? How is he reforming prisons if he is not? Did it move back to his portfolio? I don't understand. So we already have a situation where the commissioner has appeared more absent, like his prime minister. And again, it's perception. We complain that the prime minister is not present, and then it seems as though her frustration is taken out on the population when she is present, or at least when it is alleged that she has spoken to us. And it's almost like a double whammy. She's either not here or saying something that half the population is going to be upset about. And let's not forget, the position of Commissioner of Police, and to be fair to the government, it was made politically sensitive because of the previous administration, because of the whole meritless debacle, and also the fact that a DCP arrested the COP, we still have yet to find out exactly what law did she or did she not allegedly break. With the implication that, given the fact that the DPP was not able to recommend charges ever, that she technically did break a law, and that whole exercise went off half-baked at best. And when you have that in your recent history, in your living memory of a year or two ago, and let's also not forget the Brent Thomas thing. Dare I say, we also have situations where other heads of other services are sent on leave, or this, or that, or the other. When you have these things happening, and now you have a situation where, wait, we are unaware enough of his leave that we have to question, was it authorized or not? Who is in charge with him gone? When you have these things during a state of emergency, and that's our recent history, it's easy to see where there will be members of the public who will have more questions than self-reassurances. Trust and confidence in the police is not in a good place, to say the least. Why are you then putting the onus, more onus on the population to hope for the best, to not assume the worst? And the conspiracy theorists could go way crazier than me. Perception. Perception is a hell of a thing. Right now, it probably was perceived that Labour would have been better off under the UNC when compared to the PNM. The problem is, and one would think, all right, the former head of the PSA, he's a full minister, Minister of Labour. Note, we don't necessarily hear him speak much when the unions come a-knocking. Maybe it's because they're concerned about a potential conflict of interest. Right now, the PSA situation was settled when Minister Padarath intervened with WASA. Here's the funny thing. The PSA is telling Marvin Gonzalez, don't speak, because you're going to mash up WASA with your restructuring plan. Meanwhile, she's complaining about the hierarchy in WASA right now. In Dasam, the HR director is not advancing our proposals. Something is wrong. We're going to protest. And then their fairy god political party swoops in and saves the day, as one would expect for the most favored union. They have political backing. How dare the government's WASA executive mistreat the government's most favored union? Because obviously, nothing is wrong with WASA. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Nothing. WASA is the epitome of great public sector management and a responsible union working hand in hand with the government to ensure that that entity does not go out of control with regards to a whole host of various pitfalls of a public sector entity, of a public utility, like hiring too many people and having a bloated labor force. But then, of course, you have other not-so-favored unions, like the Communication Workers Union, who has issued a rallying cry to the country's trade unions to break their silence and put political loyalties aside, warning that workers are being made to carry the burden of adjustments while thousands face job losses and mounting economic pressure. Let's not forget, there's another former union leader. He's the junior minister of public utilities. Ain't that something? Your former boss, because you got promoted to president, he's the Minister of Labor. And now, when you have a sneeze, when you sneeze, the country apparently catches a cold because the government swoops in to try to hush that talk or protest. No, we can't allow the PSA to protest. I mean, right next to the yellow is the green on the campaign trail. But the poor people wearing the brown shirts of the CWU, they saw their former union leader go off to greener pastures, but they're seemingly being left in the cold. And they don't have a Minister Paderat to swoop in to save the day for them, or Minister Batiste, not even a Minister Elder. Perception. Now, if you're a UNC supporter, again, it has to be the union's fault. They were supposed to jump on the bandwagon in the election. They should have showed their political loyalty. They're unions. They're not supposed to have political loyalty. The PSA's actions on the campaign trail, that of President Felicia Thomas, it's questionable at best. An argument could be made. You can question the fact the price of their votes was 10%. And someone was real slick with it, because you don't have to give everybody 10%. You just have to not say until after the election that not everybody is going to get 10%. You let the implication hang. Everyone assumes, oh my gosh, they're so by 7 p.m., they're going to give us 10%. But as I always say, there's more to these things than just your money. Just ask the Nursing Association. It's your working conditions. Right? Everybody's concerned about their money, their money, their money. The money's not there, folks. This is what I don't understand. The government went into debt. The government went into debt to service the increase in salaries for this budget. And yet, we're still, as a public, going to fall for the cries of, oh my gosh, our money, and we're not being paid enough, and they need to pay us more. Just note, a lot of people perceive, well, the PNM is there, so if the corruption in the PNM wasn't there, there would be more money. Except, what happened now? Well, it's the UNC, and they're doing the same thing. They have to get loans to pay salaries. This is something that we complained about. This is something the UNC opposition complained about. The equation hasn't changed. They did not change the game. They did not flip the script. They did not make any meaningful adjustments or innovations. They did exactly what the PNM did. They took out loans to pay salaries, to pay recurring expenditures. Because they don't have the money at hand. They don't have the revenue. 200+ million in a quarter of tax revenue and fines is not going to make up the shortfall. And that's not including the next round of 10% for the other union that we mentioned yesterday. So we hear, oh my gosh, the workers, the plight of the workers. First of all, no one apparently cares about the private sector workers. Let me just say that again. Just saying, right? The plight of the workers, the plight of the workers. But dare I ask you, I understand, you hear union, we haven't had pay increases since XYZ. How bad is that? Woe is me. And the public falls for the crocodile tears. Because then it's the same public that's going to complain. Why are you taking out loans to pay salaries? Because the unions basically successfully lobbied for an increase in salary when we don't have the revenue for it. So on one hand, we pity the unions. On the other hand, we complain, why are you taking out loans to pay their salaries? What do you want cut? You want education to be cut? You want healthcare to be cut? You want national security to be cut? You want the social program or the grant that you're benefiting to be cut? You want road repair to not be done for a whole year again? You want WASA to not have any kind of budget to fix the leaks? They had emergency repairs on the pipeline, right, by Boy Scouts because a tree fell on the pipe late last week. There are 2 leaks on Cobblins Avenue. Water is just spewing. Water is just gushing out. Well, it's not a big gush, but it's spewing out. We're under a water shortage situation right now. But it's fine, WASA has to protest, so obviously they're not going to come to fix no leak. We have a water shortage. Water is being wasted, but that's okay. Where our money is more important. You know, the money that the government is going to have to take another loan for. And then you want to come on your high horse and say Marvin Gonzalez shouldn't say anything. To be honest, I technically have nothing to, just because he's a member of the PNM doesn't mean I automatically criticize him for wearing a balize. I actually don't have anything practical to criticize him for with regards to WASA. I don't. You might disagree with the restructuring plan. I don't know if it's his plan. And it wasn't implemented. So on some level, I have your word against his, but your union. Of course you don't want the restructuring plan. That's like saying the UNC doesn't want the PNM to win the election. Of course they don't want the PNM to win the election. This is not rocket science here, folks. It is within the union's interests for a restructuring plan by any government to not be undertaken because they like the status quo, because they benefit somehow, some way from the status quo, because they protect the status quo. I had Michael Arasa tell me that there are too many workers on the port, but then he couldn't say that the union would commit to reducing the number of workers on the port to a much more manageable level. All he would say is, well, it's the politician's fault. Meanwhile, he's going to protect every single one of those jobs. My assumption is because the more people work on the port, the more dues the union gets. That's my assumption. I don't know. But he admitted that the situation was not healthy. So at least he wasn't trying to sugarcoat the truth. Of course, as a union leader, he can't commit to reducing the workforce of the union. That could potentially get him fired. That is not within the interest of the union. I get that. There are different ways to handle this. At least he's being upfront about it. And you could see why he has to say the things that he says. I don't want to hear from a UNC lobbyist that a member of the PNM can't talk about something when his track record doesn't have that many, from my vantage point, and I can't trust yours, negative things to his name. Yes, there might be things that we don't like about Marvin Gonzalez, but I don't have an issue with him and WASA. I'll never forget when they had another situation of emergency repairs. Then Minister Gonzalez didn't say, look at me, that is performance, promises made, promises kept. He said, the people at WASA did the work, congratulate the people at WASA. Ain't that something? Current government will take credit for anything. Perception. So we might want to perceive things in different ways, but we have to make it make sense, right? With the politics, there's room for subjectivity. Did the government actually try to cancel Stuart Young and Dr. Trolley's visas by making recommendations to the states? Did those recommendations have a direct effect? Or was it an indirect thing? Or did it have nothing to do at all in the grand scheme of things? We don't know. The politics leaves room for perception. The politics leaves room for people to suspect political persecution. But when it comes to the overall narrative, it's either we want to see unions get more money, and then we have to tolerate whatever means the government finds the financial resources to facilitate those increases. And if we don't want to tolerate those means, then maybe we need to stop trying to have our cake and eat it too. Because what's happening now? When a union leader has to say that workers are being made to carry the burden of adjustment, that includes potentially all the economic policies that are increasing the cost of living. And this is where the unions don't necessarily understand what it is they're doing. You're demanding salary increases while the government is saying, oh, we're going to have to tax more and increase fees. What do you think they want all the revenue, the extra revenue for? So you can't demand the government spend more money and then have issues with where they get the money. It's either our pockets or loans. Both are potentially bad for economic growth, which means that the prospects of improving the economy, of improving the jobs available in order to get employment for those currently unemployed, the prospects of growing the economy to improve business levels, economic activity, which would naturally see more money to spread around, which would naturally then foster greater degrees of job security, all that goes out the window. The more harm, the more pressure is put on the economy. But it's all right. It's all right because the union is negotiating for more money, because that's what they always do. More money, more money, more money. And I'm telling you, while I have now reached the point of saying the refinery should have never closed, the fact of the matter is the OWTU, they negotiated themselves into a corner. Because nobody thought that Petrotrin, I don't think anyone would assume, oh, that's a model of efficiency and ethical responsibility. The assumption is corruption across the board. Nepotism, friend of a friend, eat a food mentality, because government never runs out of money until we do. That's the point. We can't afford the levels of corruption we previously could have afforded. And now the PNM ran into that brick wall. Now the UNC is running into that brick wall. The harsh reality of the now. The partnership got it just on the tail of their term. I don't know if they underestimated the situation, which would be ridiculous to say the least, given the fact that they should have known. But I guess when you have someone with a bachelor's of economics being your main financial guy, properly analyzing the data seemingly is too high of an expectation, apparently. So this is why we need to be more engaged. If all we do is just look at the headlines, then we would say, well, the government persecuted the PNM, and we would assume this and we would assume that. You need to figure out how to read between the lines a little bit more. Build up your knowledge base beyond just the bubble. The president of the PSA said, well, we were engaged in negotiations. And basically, let me make sure I get this correct. One of the things that we fought for is the return of negotiations, because what was happening before was not negotiations. When the HR director and her team walked out, I believe that's what she's referring to. We were being met with take it or leave it, and that is not the situation today. This is part and parcel of negotiations, so we are grateful to have negotiations actually taking place. Well, what exactly is part and parcel of negotiations? One side says take it or leave it, and then you have to protest. Is that normal? Because this cardboard thing for salary is starting to wear thin on me. Because you have a lot of people looking at the economy and they're being stressed out because they don't have a glass of water to save them. Whatever it is that they're lacking, there's nothing that they have waiting in the wings to quench their thirst for it. Meanwhile, your argument is our money, our money, our money. It's not too dissimilar to Twitter when in the midst of COVID, they're basically saying, we don't want to go out to work, it's not safe, but we need to be compensated for the internet that we use. But hold on, the government doesn't want you to have to use the internet, so why should the government have to pay for your internet? That's not how this works. And we've reached a point in time where everything economically needs to be scrutinized. Like how I believe we scrutinize national security. And if we're not willing to do so, We're going to be slave to our perceptions if we take the easy way out, the lazy way out. Especially when our perceptions are not consistent, do not craft a consistent narrative, but rather contradict each other. We cannot think that it is evil to not increase people's salaries and then complain about where the money is sourced from. We have to pick one. I'm not telling you which one to pick. I'm telling you, you can't go left and right at the same time. Pick one direction. If that is the will of the people, if that's what the country, the democratic majority wants to do, fine. I have to live with it. That's what it means. But democracy doesn't mean that we could support something, desire something, want something, and then complain about how it backs the government in the corner and they do something to say about it that we disagree with. We have to bear some of the burden of the responsibility of what we're doing ourselves and not just fall victim to the emotional arguments that lack detail that more often than not is presented to the public space. On some level, we get away with that. We don't suffer as much consequences with that when it comes to the politics, but I would argue even then, that's subjective, and the reality is we still pay for it in the long run. But when it comes to the economy, it's different. Emotional arguments that are appealing to our human nature, that are not always rooted in facts and necessity. We feel the damage done immediately. So who do we want to be? How do we want to operate? How do we want to live? We want to live off of loans? We want to be the rich uncle who's no longer rich, but he's trying to utilize loans in order to maintain his lifestyle, which potentially and eventually can lead to bankruptcy? Or do we want to say, hey, maybe we need to be more fiscally responsible? And then that's the starting point for the conversation. Doesn't mean the unions can't get some kind of increase. But at the end of the day, Felicia Thomas, I'm sorry. You got 10% because of politics, because of a political promise, because you went on a stage and you said when UNC wins, everybody wins. And then you did not go on a follow-up public appearance of any kind to then champion the cause of any of the other unions, as far as I'm aware. You didn't publicly speak up for the Communication Workers Union, or tutor, or the nurses, or anybody else, because you got your 10%. So please, if that's how you want to frame yourself, if that's the perception you want us to have of you, do not pretend to have a moral high horse and tell others that they can't talk. Don't do it. Not everybody is perceived to have a government minister on speed dial in their back pocket. Let's take a break. When we come back, we should have our media ambassador. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Your health matters, and the answers you need are just one conversation away. What's Up Doc is back for an exciting season 5, and we're bringing to you Trinidad and Tobago's leading medical professionals to discuss the issues that affect you and your family. From prevention and treatment to wellness and the latest medical technology. Get trusted advice, ask your questions, and stay informed. We also have an exciting new addition to the What's Up Doc family, our very own fitness instructor, Elena, who will provide easy, practical exercises you can implement in your daily routine. So don't miss What's Up Doc, Season 5, only on WESN, the content capital. Because when it comes to your health, knowledge is the best medicine.
And we're back here and talking about the release, and we have a delay with our media ambassador. He is out in the field, but he is with us. He should be coming back just now. In the meantime, that gives me an opportunity to speak about a situation. I didn't necessarily know this was happening. Ironically, I would have been in Tobago when this was scheduled to take place. And this is with regards to a proposed island-wide convention on autonomy that was supposed to happen on August the 10th, and it never took place. And Denise Soyafat Angus is asking for answers. Why did it not take place? Right? On June the 25th, apparently, the Chief Sec said Tobago would be shut down for the day to allow various political voices, religious groups, professionals, non-government organizations, and the average citizen to give their perspectives on what self-governance means. And folks, therein lies one of the issues, if not the biggest issue, with the political football that is Tobago autonomy. If you are going to, and to be fair, it's not just the TPP/PDP that did this, the PNM did this as well. You're going to campaign on an issue years before you have finalized the meaning of what that issue is. That is one of the problems Tobago autonomy has. The public doesn't know what it is. So the perception of the public on what autonomy means varies wildly. And the appreciation for the specific circumstances of Tobago is not really there for most people. Most people don't necessarily consider the fact that, yes, the people in Mayaro are deserving, just as deserving, of a good standard of living as the people in Tobago. But the people in Tobago, they have a certain amount of challenges or certain types of challenges that the rest of the country does not have. Not to say that it's easy for the people in Mayaro or the people in Blanchisseuse or the people in La Brea or Kumuto or wherever, or Toko. It's not necessarily easy for them. In some ways, it might not even be easier. You know, there might be things on the shelves of supermarkets in Tobago that you're not going to get on the shelves of supermarkets in Mayaro. But at the end of the day, people could still drive to Mayaro. Delivery trucks could still just drive from warehouses all over Trinidad to Mayaro. But just the fact that it's separated by sea makes Tobago a unique situation. It also allows Tobago, and one could argue that Tobago could be a test case for local ordinances. Because, again, the traffic situation in Tobago, if that was a central government thing, I'm not entirely sure, then that is a very good example of you have people not living there, not understanding what's going on, what the challenges are specific to that area, making decisions that impact that area. But the thing is, a lot of those nuances are lost to the rest of the country, and maybe even to Tobagonians themselves in various ways. Because to the rest of the country, we have one government, and the local government body is just a very much junior partner, a subordinate. The THA is different. It is technically a subordinate, but the partnership is more in line with a partnership. A junior partner, yes, but still more in line with a partnership than a pure subordinate. And it's even more so now, in a way, because the political party controlling the THA is not one of the main political parties in the Red House. And by not defining autonomy, people, they don't have an appreciation of the unique circumstances of Tobago. What they want autonomy for? What do they mean? And the thing is, they've had so many things put out into the public as to what was being proposed in a very general sense, that the situation is not always perceived as reasonable by people in Trinidad. Because the one thing I do know is, politically speaking, the Chief Secretary said autonomy, but he has walked away or walked back from any notions of demanding independence, which I think is important, because even if the argument of the oil and gas resources in Tobago waters should be used for Tobago, let's just say that goes through. When it runs out, what you're going to do? The hope is the economy in Tobago is robust enough. But independence means now the domestic market of Trinidad is not so simple. Now trade is not so simple. Getting goods from international suppliers is not so simple, and we import so much of our stuff, right? Now there might be extra fees, extra cost of living, extra layers of bureaucracy. So I appreciate that they never entertained that, at least not yet. But what is autonomy? The fact that you called for in 2076 stakeholders to give their perspective on what self-governance means. How could you then campaign on that as an issue? And this is what has me concerned, because according to the THA, it could have been before they were TPP, so technically they would have been under the banner of the PDP. They've already had consultations. In fact, I believe it was while they were still the PDP. They already had consultations. That is what I got from the now Deputy Chief Secretary herself. They're fed up with the amount of consultations on autonomy. That's why when the then UNC opposition brought up the fact that there needs to be consultations, I kind of looked at them and said, time out, did you all even compare notes with the politicians in Tobago? Not the PNM ones, the other ones, you know? The political opponents of the PNM in Tobago, on some level they were your counterparts then. Did you all even compare notes with them? Only for this to happen. That you are now still asking for input, essentially for consultation. And this is the problem. autonomy will never happen if it cannot be defined. And at this point, I believe it should not be this hard to get it done. So the question is why? Why is it this hard to get it done? Because even if the perspective of Tobagonians vary too wildly and have too many contradicting requirements, it's still been a significant amount of time that you could have gotten a proposal put together to be presented for meaningful action and meaningful debate. But we haven't had that. Why? And before anyone thinks this is an attack on the THA and the TPP, make note, the PNM under Tracy Davis and Celestine also campaigned on autonomy. And they did not offer us anything, I believe, meaningful with regards to autonomy. That's why the proposed legislation at the time, no one was crying crocodile tears of what could have happened if it passed. Just saying. All right, we do have the ASP, so are we going straight in with him? All right, acting ASP Christopher Arun with us once again, from the field once again, you know, proving, as he did last week, that he's a very busy man, that he's potentially overworked, and we could only thank him for his dedication and hope his family doesn't have complaints because he seems to be working all the time.
Yeah, that's all right, Sean. Thanks for having me. Good day to you and your colleagues and your viewers. Well, of course, you know, today we only feel again. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it yesterday. It got really tied up. Just want to send condolences out to a colleague of mine, Miss Bodo. She was a dialysis patient, and I understand she died this morning. She was one of the heads at HR and police admin in Port of Spain. And I knew her very well, and you know, it's pretty sad this morning to hear the news from my colleagues. You know, condolences to her and her family. Her husband and I work very closely together in Special Victims Department. And I really wish to extend condolences to the family. I mean, you know, TTPS they have the support of the TTPS, and you know, I would be visiting them sometime later on to see how they are making out, how they cope.
I just want to say, folks, I mean, I don't necessarily know to what extent, you know, she had a schedule like yours. But things like this. She was
working well into yesterday. Yeah, I believe she was working up to yesterday in admin. So she was working.
This is why when we have situations where people question, is the police being overworked, is the police being overworked? I understand that some officers cause a bad perception of the service. But we have other officers like this where you just have to wonder, are we pushing them too hard? And I know, look, I know on some level, officers like yourself, Chris, you're kind of opt into, yeah, I'm here to work hard. It's just what we do.
Yeah. So, condolences to them.
Yes.
She was a civilian head, though. She wasn't a police officer, but nonetheless. She was a very, very hardworking lady. As far as I knew, she was a very hardworking lady. And you know, on behalf of the Commissioner of Police, the executive, and myself, we extend condolences to the family. The topic today, Sean, is stand your ground laws. Just to remind members of the public that the laws came into effect on the 20th of January 2026. It involves members of society and public protecting themselves at home and using as much force as is necessary to protect themselves and their family and their property. Now, the volume on the scale of which you use force, deadly force, would be investigated. And any incident that takes place at your home in which suspects or persons have been injured or deadly force was used, the Toronto Police Service would be conducting investigations. Nonetheless, you know, we wanted to remind members of the public that in not all cases deadly force must be used. It should be proportionate, and you know, the specifications have to do with where you believe as a homeowner, or when I say homeowner, I mean occupier as well, because you could be renting, you could be staying, you could be lodging at somebody's home, and then you have no other choice but to use force. But the deadly force comes into play when you yourself believe that your life or that of any other occupier of the home, their lives were at risk of imminent danger. There was risk of grievous body harm, grievous sexual assault or rape, and you can use as much force as is necessary to protect those persons, including deadly force. And the TTPS would conduct investigations to ensure that the force used was reasonable. Our court may have to determine that, though. We would just present the facts to the court, and only the court can determine if self-defense was absolutely needed in this case, and if deadly force was used. The court will determine that it was justified.
And that's the thing. People kind of need to understand there are certain things that are automatic. So when they say we are looking into the incident that happened in your home where you defended yourself, it's not automatically, well, we suspect you did something wrong and we're going to try to find evidence to prosecute you and charge you and convict you. It is normal procedure. Any incident that has violence, you'll have to look into it, right?
Of course, correct. Yeah.
And I guess this is one of those things where proportional response, unfortunately, and perhaps maybe, what has happened this year notwithstanding, if the public had examples of cases where, members of the public, unfortunately, we don't hope for this to happen, but if they're involved in incidents like this, there would perhaps be examples of, look, when you're in a hostile confrontation, it's very subjective. There's no, well, A equals B scenario of this is what's reasonable and just do this and it's reasonable or not. So when a member of the public is defending themselves, is forced to defend themselves with violence, the subjectivity of the fact that it's always going to be a dynamic situation. It's not easy to say it's cookie cutter. You just apply the template and you're within the bounds, right? Because again, notwithstanding, trust and confidence in police is low, but I'll still put forward the fact that, look, you can't just dictate to the police, hey, these things are straightforward. Either you're right or you're wrong, and it's obvious in the moment of what it is when you're in a violent.
And of course, as the TTPS, we would understand that it's not an easy decision to make when you're in your home and 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody invades your home, and I want to use the word invade. Somebody invades your home, and you have no other choice but to use force to disarm them, to protect yourself. The lighting conditions may be poor. We understand that, Sean. So we would look at all of that, those circumstances. We would capture all of that and present it to the court to ensure that you have you have a reasonable expectation that you would not be charged unnecessarily. Because we have to take into consideration, we must take into consideration all these circumstances when looking into the investigation. So don't just think, you use force, you kill somebody, somebody died, whatnot. We would look at exactly the fear factors, the circumstances that made you believe that your life was in danger and that of any other member of the household were in danger, and we would consider all of that. So it's not a one-off. It's not as you say, it's not a template for you to use deadly force. However, we would look at every situation in its own arena and its own circumstances. It's not a one-off.
Now, one of the things I think also too that people make the mistake of, right, is that, as you say, I could just use violence. And now I'm going beyond. Some people just assume, oh, I could do whatever I want in this situation, right? You're at my mercy. Some people might make a mistake, but then there are others who will make the mistake of they just don't know. They just don't know that, hey, you might think that this blunt object is not necessarily lethal force.
Right.
But this blunt object, you're striking somebody, it can be considered lethal force. You might be, you think you're within the bounds of, oh, well, I knocked the guy out like on TV, right? That's fine. Right. But it's like, no. You could still potentially permanently damage somebody, and that might be potentially outside the realm of reasonableness, right? So you can't just assume, oh, well, Yeah, it's blunt. Because it's blunt, it's safe.
Yeah. No. Well, Sean, you're absolutely correct. Don't assume that the object you're using, the weapon you're using, would not cause any injury or death. As you say, you have to take into consideration that the object you might be using could cause death or harmful injury. However, we must take into consideration the fear factor at the time. So that because, so your fear must be reasonable and you must apprehend the fear as imminent and urgent at the time of the incident. So we'll look at all of that. So hopefully you will not use deadly force unnecessarily. Does that you understand anything by that, John?
Yeah. I guess one of the things that I do wonder, because when we were speaking about stand your ground with firearms, and whether you have the firearms or not, it's one of those things where this is weird, right? Because how do you prepare for these kind of confrontations? And then
it's difficult. No, it's an unprepared situation, Sean. Nobody expects anybody to break in their home at 2 o'clock in the morning and try to rape, murder, or steal. It's in the back of your mind it can happen. But when you're definitely confronted by it, it's not a situation you want to be in, and you may act unreasonable due to the fear factors and the circumstances that surround you at that time. And we as police officers will be taking that in consideration when we conduct an investigation. So, don't feel because you've used deadly force or, you've caused somebody injury, that means you'll be charged. However, we would be looking at those circumstances when conducting the investigation. So as much as possible, use as much reasonable force as possible, unnecessary.
I think one of the other things too is we kind of take it for granted. Yes, you have a right to stand and defend your ground, but a lot of the times, unless you're living alone, there will be other people in the house. One of the things, like, you don't know how many people might come to invade your house. You don't know if they're going to have guns or not. But on some level, if you think, this is what I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think there might be situations where you are going to look to defend your home, you perhaps need to have some basic plans in place, or you could tell the family, go out the back, go hide in the bathroom, or what have you, that nothing too complicated, something very basic that the family's aware of, the kids are aware of, so that in case of emergency, you could just tell them quick, hey, you all need to do this, so go here to get out of harm's way. Because once, I assume that's the whole point, right? It's to defend your family, and you don't want the kids kind of panicking and running out, or your wife panicking and running into the path of the criminals, because then, at that point, yes, you want to defend yourself, but at that point, the way how crime is today, you can never tell which criminals are just here to rob your stuff and which ones are going to use themselves excessive violence and harm your family.
Well, what we've seen, the pattern we've seen when it comes to home invasions, especially, we've seen a pattern of violence being used against the victims of the home, the occupants of the home. They've been beaten. In some cases, unfortunately, some people have been killed. But they've come to steal, they've come to rob, they've come to kill, they've come to injure someone. And you need to use as much force as is necessary to protect yourselves and your family. So we understand that, and they're unpredictable. However, the pattern we've seen so far is that they're coming to injure and to harm persons in the household, including rape, including previous sexual assault. So please take all necessary actions to protect yourselves and your family when you're in your house and you've been invaded. Use as much force as is necessary. And if you believe that your life is in danger and you have to use deadly force, you have to use deadly force.
And this is where, again, we kind of take it for granted. I know that we take things like alarms for granted, lights for granted, cameras for granted. But a lot of times, so if you have a camera system, it's not just to record the crime happening. You could potentially look at it and see, oh, the criminals are at the front door, the criminals are at the back door, right? You could the alarm combined with anyone shouting for help and things like that could alert the community, wake up. I mean, in the middle of a suburb, you know, you hear an alarm during the day, you're kind of like, eh. But it might wake you up. And once you're awake now, you might hear unusual activity happening in a neighbor's yard, and it might alert people. The lights with the cameras gives you a chance to observe what's going on if it's well lit, for your neighbors to observe what's going on.
And that's a great point, Sean, that once you observe these situations taking place, you need to contact 999. You need to call the police immediately, especially with home invasions. You have response units that would attend to these reports immediately. Call 999, let them know your observations, and you need police officers at your home because there is a risk of a home invasion, and they would send the officers immediately. We've had cases where we've been able to send officers immediately, and they were able to apprehend persons that were potentially in the process of conducting home invasions. So we were able to deal with those situations and apprehend those perpetrators. So as soon as you observe these cases, contact 999 so that we could send a patrol unit or emergency response unit.
I guess that's the other thing, right? Comes back to police response, but at the end of the day, you still need to do it. I assume 999 hopefully will give. People have a poor perception, but the point is, I think we need to understand you might not be able to defend your family on an island indefinitely, right? It's not always a situation where the criminals are going to run away to escape. So you have to make the attempt to call for help and potentially realize also, hey, it's one of me, it's 8 of them. Do I need to stand my ground in this situation? Because that's the other thing.
Yes.
It's just because you can doesn't mean you should. And this is where I think
correct.
some
common sense should
training.
always, We have cases where, you know, adrenaline is pumping and you make rash decisions in an imminent situation. However, once you can apply common sense and logic, you believe that you'll be safe, and that is the key factor there, Sean, that you believe that you'll be safe, then, you know, apply the common sense approach. And if it is that you recognize that it's a simple robbery and you know, there's no harm to you, and again, the evidence doesn't indicate that you won't be harmed. It seems that the trend is that you will be harmed. But nonetheless, if you believe that common sense and logic applies here and you can use reasonable force, or, you know, you believe the situation would be over shortly, then yes, then as much as possible, take caution and apply that common sense logical approach and stay away from using the force that you believe that might be unreasonable.
And for neighbors in these kind of situations, I have the right to stand my ground.
Right.
If I see my neighbor in trouble.
Yeah.
What is the legality of, I don't have a firearm, let's say I do. Someone with a firearm. My neighbor's being attacked.
Yeah.
Do I have the authorization to go and help defend his home?
Of course, because now with firearms, and in any case, like the TTPS has rules of engagement. It has the use of force policy. So when it comes to holders of firearms and anybody who wants to engage another entity or another person to address any illegal activity that may be taking place, you would want to approach that using that use of force mindset, that rules of engagement mindset, where you are approaching those persons to protect the lives of those in that household. So you have to understand, if I'm coming with a firearm or a weapon to help those that are in need, I'm coming in with intention to protect their lives. So their lives must be in danger, or they must have reasonable belief that their lives are in danger, so that you can apply deadly force or reasonable force to protect the lives of others. So if I were to be engaged in a firefight as a police officer, I will be engaging in that firefight, not to protect myself alone, but to the lives of my colleagues and other persons who might be standing by, to or who might be bystanders. So nonetheless, if it's a neighbor's home and you believe that they are in danger, you could go across and with as much caution and reasonable force as necessary, you can engage those persons in that home. You will be legally allowed to do that. It won't be against the law. Because at the time of the incident, you were of the belief that those persons' lives were in danger or at risk of imminent threat and harm.
Now, recently there was a semi-famous, semi-viral situation in the States in Idaho where an off-duty officer and a civilian engaged with a gunman and drove him off. And I don't know if some people think, because when the civilian was interviewed, he said, well, look, I trained for this. And some people might think he's an overzealous gun nut. But what I took away from it is that, well, no, he wanted to be aware of what to do in this type of situation and be prepared, because he didn't look to kill the assailant. He was just looking to engage him. And as he said, you know, he said, well, the gunman looked very comfortable. And then all of a sudden panicked when someone was firing back at him. And it seemed like that was enough. That was enough. He wasn't looking to kill. He wasn't looking to hit. He was just, look, I'm going to engage you. You run away. That's fine. I let you run away. I'm not here to now look to chase after you and expand the situation. And I think that's a good example of, listen, it's fine to be prepared. It's fine to have some degree of interest in it, and you also need to then understand the responsibilities, not to cause the situation to escalate, but if you're going to intervene, as you say.
It sounds like the perpetrator is talking about. That example sounds like he was in retreat. So if he's in retreat, you wouldn't want to shoot him in his back.
Right.
Or it sounds like he was no longer a threat. So this is where the reasonableness of the actions are investigated. If the person was in retreat and running away from the situation, then you can't shoot them in their backs because the threat no longer existed. So then, you know, you have to be careful how you apply those actions. You take caution and you use reasonable, or the force that you're using is unreasonable at that point in time. So you have to be careful with that. But again, if the threat exists where you believe that your life was in harm or in imminent danger, then use as much force as is necessary to protect yourself, your family, and your property.
And I guess this is one of the things where part of it too is being prepared is, to whatever degree you can, also try to understand the law, understand the limits of the law, understand where you are still responsible. Because as you say, you can't shoot at someone fleeing. Because people might think, this is the thing, I think people will think, well, he's a criminal, why you mean I can't shoot him? Well, the problem is, if you can, not only the fact that you're shooting a fleeing person, that's no longer a threat, but if you continue the gunfight and he shoots back, and you or somebody else gets hit, when if you just let him go, the gunfight might have ended there. It's not your job as a civilian to get a gunman off the streets. You're just there to defend yourself, right?
Right, correct. But if you want to apprehend him, you'll be protected under the Criminal Offences Act, where you apprehended somebody who just committed an arrestable offense, which might, in this case, of a home invasion, would be housebreaking or burglary, or home invasion itself. I believe the offense is home invasion. So then, because that arrestable offense was committed, whether it be rape, whether it be murder, whether it be previous bodily harm, wounded with intent, any assault, once you believe that this person, once you can apprehend the person, you could go ahead and use as much reasonable force as is necessary to apprehend the person. So apprehension and stand your ground would be two totally different laws here.
But just for the record, it's not that you're saying, oh, well, you see violent crime, you need to go, members of the public, and you need to go and always apprehend the perpetrator. But
you're not saying that.
But there will be situations where, look, you're in a situation, he is kind of cut off, he's, you know, like, you might be in a situation where you have to take his surrender. Right?
Of course.
And then now, it can't be claimed, or you're illegally detaining anybody. No, it's like, you broke into my house, I have you cornered because you got trapped in my house for some strange reason, I could now legally apprehend you to resolve the situation, right?
Yeah.
Or you see someone getting attacked, getting raped, I could put a gun to your head, say, whoa, you need to stop that. Tell you lie down on the ground, as a means to end the situation. But we ain't gonna look to get vigilante mobs being formed to go into the bushes.
Then you'll be enter the realm of causing harm to the perpetrator who was reasonably apprehended and reasonable force was already used, and to go further would to assault him or to wound him or to cause him grievous body harm or even death. And then you would be the subject of an investigation and you'll be subject of charges. So you don't want to go beyond your limit.
Now,
so you have a limit.
Let's go a step further. You successfully engage. You injure the assailant, right? And you could hit them on the head with a heavy object. That could be potentially lethal. You stab them with a knife because that's all you have at hand. You shoot them with a gun because you have a legally owned firearm, right? So they're bleeding out. On some level, you do have a responsibility, correct, to seek medical attention for them. Obviously, if they're going to continue to struggle and fight and run and stuff, you still call for emergency response. But if they're out on the ground, bleeding out in your kitchen, you technically can't just say, well, they're a criminal, let them die. You do have to now try to render as much aid reasonably.
Yeah, reasonable. So the least you could do is contact the emergency services. It's 811. You could contact the ambulance. You could contact 999. 999 will have an ambulance sent across. You could contact 990, which is fire services have ambulances as well, and they would send an ambulance across. You have 811, you have 999, you have 990, and an ambulance would be dispatched plus law enforcement. So as soon as that's the least you could do. You could contact some type of emergency service. There's no persons may not have medical training where they could apply medical training to assist the person to recover, nor they have the necessary training to move the person. So you would want to contact, to save somebody's life, you may want to put them in a vehicle and take them to the hospital. But if you're not medically trained to do that, I would advise that you contact emergency services so that could be administered so they could come across as soon as possible to administer medical attention. If the person may survive, or if there's a better chance that they survive, if you take them to the hospital, the police won't charge you because you didn't do it, because you already contacted medical emergency services. So the police wouldn't say, okay, well, you failed to take them for medical attention. No, it doesn't work like that. We understand, especially if you don't have medical training.
Right.
But so we understand all of that.
And then also there's the fact that you just had a home invasion. The assailant might not have been alone. If you're the only man in the house, how are you going to leave?
Exactly.
You're gonna tell your wife, take him to the hospital? Or an elderly relative?
The least you could do is contact medical services, and they would send a dispatch an ambulance immediately. 999 fire services would do the same thing, and the police would also contact the emergency services immediately and send across an ambulance.
Go ahead.
So you need to make that move. Also, hopefully you have charge on your phone. If not, and you can take the person for medical attention, then you feel free to do that. If you have to bind them because you have arrested them, you have apprehended them, then you're fully free to do that as well.
And let's say you shoot at them, maybe you stab one, they run away.
Yeah.
I don't know if people might assume, I'm not going to call it in. Nothing will come of it anyway. No, you still need to call the police to say, hey, I shot at somebody. Yeah,
this is to protect your rights, Sean. When you contact the police or the emergency services to let them know something happened, this is protect you from any litigation, any suit that somebody might make against you, indicating, well, look, you failed to assist them and whatnot. So once there's an incident, the investigation is not just to pinpoint that you've committed an offense, is also to alleviate you from prosecution. So if the police once you make that phone call, or you contact the police, you go to the police station, they would initiate an investigation to prove that you acted within the law and that you should never be charged for an offense emanating from this incident. So it's not just to pinpoint you as and prosecute you, but it's also to alleviate you from any criminal negligence.
Well, also there is the fact that if I want to do my part for crime, I defend myself, I shot at some assailants, maybe one of them gets shot, maybe they look to seek medical attention. If the police are aware, they would know to say, hey, somebody might go to the hospital because they got shot with a bullet. Maybe that's something we should look into, right? And we would be aware of it in the moment to be ready to catch them, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, stand your ground, laws. I guess I don't know if are there any more recommendations you might have, because this is one of those things where I'm always kind of uneasy because it's so subjective. Even if you have training, it might not account for every scenario. Obviously, you as a civilian are not going to easily be able to strategize and prepare. Well, if they come in, I'm going to do this, and if they come in, is there any recommendations you might make beyond the make sure you have cameras and lights and you secure your premises properly and you have alarms and put all the things in place, I guess, to make it a hardened target to dissuade and to delay their entry so that you could buy yourself as much time? Because part of it too is, the concern is you might be sleeping when it happens.
Yeah. Well, the best recommendation, Sean, is to always be prepared. Like the Boy Scouts say, always be prepared. You would want to be prepared in the sense of not just the cameras and the alarms, but you have backup plans. You have plans with your neighbors that, listen, if you were to hear something, look across. You know, if there's an argument, there was once a motto we practiced and used. If you see something, say something. We want people to continue with that. If you were to see anything, let your neighbors know, listen, if there's anything you need to come across and assist us with. If there's any unusual alarms, any unusual noises, people need to look into that. You need to have backup plans, like a direct route to the hospital, maybe the police station, routes that you would have practiced in the case of an emergency, and even in the household emergency situations that could take place. So, like, if there were to be a home invasion, what would be the actions of everybody in the household? So let's prepare yourself for these incidents and these situations. So it's always good to be prepared. Have the first aid kits at home. Ensure that you have clothes readily available in case you have to get dressed quickly. Whatever the situation, if you need any other type of care, if you need from relatives, if you need to have a backup phone. A well-charged Nokia is a very good phone to have. I don't know if they still have Nokias, but it's a very hard phone. It's a very good phone. These smartphones tend to give trouble when you really need to use it. So you have backup plans for everything, and always be prepared. I have some colleagues in the vehicle here. I don't know if they want to say anything. You all don't have any other recommendations? I haven't shocked.
One thing though, because you mentioned with regards to child safety, you should teach your children certain phone numbers, like your number, the home number.
Yeah, correct.
And this is another thing where you should teach the kids certain things, like you said, what to do, right? You mentioned what they should be doing. One of the things is perhaps teaching them, these are the emergency numbers, right? So at the very least, they know to call 999 if anything. And then potentially, because there might be situations you can't fight. So you might need to say, you all need to run, but not just run out the back door and go in some random direction. But maybe, as you say, set things up with your neighbors. Hey, in case of anything, go to this neighbor. This is the route. Go through this gate here, go through this path there, get to this neighbor in case of, so they know where to go.
Yeah, and Sean, one thing we noticed is that in some of these cases, the neighbors did nothing. Although they were alerted to something going on in the household, some neighbors actually took a hands-down approach, what do you call it? Hands-off approach. And they did nothing, they didn't contact the police, they didn't contact anybody. And we have a home invasion taking place. So we want persons to be vigilant out there. Look, you have to be a neighbor's keeper and look out for your neighbor in these cases.
this is one of those things, right? I think one of the strongest things that keeps people living in any sort of suburb or community safe is the fact that there are more eyes of the community, not just you. So criminals need to be wary of the fact that, look, I could try and do a crime here, but I might be seen. And once I'm seen, I might be caught. But if the neighbors don't report it, then so what if you're seen? And if you allow yourself to be intimidated not to report it, then you're just adding to the crime. You're not necessarily doing your part to get to the solution, correct? Did you lose me there for a second? I think we might be losing the ASB. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, you see me?
Yeah, we're seeing you now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was just saying, but
yeah, but we were talking about neighbors.
Oh yes, neighbors having to be involved. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, you need to have a good relationship with your neighbors, Sean. You know, you don't want this to be the neighbor that you don't talk to, and you know, and something happens, and you know, you had loggerheads. They're not looking out for you. Your neighbor is your best friend. Your neighbor is your best keeper. They would look out for you. They would call the police if something were to happen. So, Sean, we need people to understand that having a good relationship with your neighbors is very important, especially in this day and age when crime is such a, you know, at a horrible position.
But I think also that relationship, when you're in the middle of it and adrenaline is pumping, it might be hard to think straight. And as a neighbor, you could be for that person, hey, I'm somewhere on the outside, all right, we need to get you to the hospital, we need to do this, we need to do that. We need to ensure these things happen for your safety, because you yourself might be on such survival, flight or fight mode. You might not think clearly, and neighbors could step in and help you.
And this is where we recommend the neighborhood watches. We recommend that it be implemented across Trinidad and Tobago. Consult with your local police station inspector or your community policing department. We have one in every district, Sean. Every station is capable of assisting you create one of these. Go to the inspector, go to the community policing officers, and employ these strategies to help in your fight against crime. So they would teach you how to have a neighborhood watch, how to set it up, how to have everybody's phone number, how to create a WhatsApp group. Anybody sees anything suspicious, they will take pictures, they will put it on the group, and this is how you help fight crime and defend yourself and prevent crime from taking place as well.
And I'd just like to end with this point, because I think some people might assume, oh, stand your ground, that means I'm supposed to win a fight. It's like, no.
No.
It's about surviving the situation.
Surviving the situation. Use common sense, use logic, and it's very difficult, Sean. We might be able to say it here, but it's very difficult when somebody's adrenaline is pumping. You're faced with fear factors that you can't control, and you have to apply measures that you would not normally apply. So you'll have to defend and fight off a perpetrator, and you don't want to, and you will not be able to reasonably think in that time. So we understand that. So it's something you want to practice. It's something you want to prepare for, so that, you know, in case these type of incidents takes place, you will be better able to deal with it and address it, so that you don't go beyond. But we as police officers understand that in conducting investigations, things like this happen, and we would take reasonable steps and in the investigation to understand from what position you came from. That fear, those fear factors, those circumstances, the suspect and the perpetrator might actually be bigger than you, Sean.
Yes.
And you have no other choice but to use as much force as necessary to fend off somebody like that. So don't think that the police come in to charge you because the person was unarmed, but the person may have been unarmed, but a lot bigger than you. Yes. And they would apply force and tactics.
Actually, yes. There was a police shooting incident where 2 officers engaged with a man, and he resisted being tased. And I think they eventually had to shoot him. This was in the States a while ago. Yeah. And I believe the supervisor basically reassured them, well, look, given the circumstances, you did what you had to do. Because
what they've seen in those cases in the States is that those suspects and perpetrators might actually, if you want to be, yeah, those suspects and perpetrators might actually have been indulging in narcotics, and it doesn't tend these strategies. So the police officer might use a taser, and it may not work because of the type of the person so much drugs that they don't feel it, and they still fight off law enforcement.
And this could be a situation where you might think, I have a gun in your face, you're supposed to stop.
Yeah.
The perpetrator might be high on some drugs, and they're not going to stop. And this is one of those now very gray area things where you might have to be prepared to shoot someone because he's charging you unarmed. But if he reaches you, you know, that causes a whole new dangerous situation.
Yeah. So we would be also looking at toxicology in terms of the perpetrator, if they had narcotics in their system at the time of the incident and whatnot. So we will be looking at in the investigation.
All right.
Because,
well, it seems like you've reached your destination.
I have to go. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You know, I mean, look, you're doing two jobs at the same time. You're going to one job while doing another job. So what more can I say?
Thanks.
Working so hard, folks. Working so hard. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too, and condolences to your colleague, your colleague's wife.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, and
it's very unfortunate. I was really looking forward to her surviving because she was expecting a transplant, and I thought she was getting through it.
Chris.
So it's very unfortunate.
Chris, I'll just say that's why you worry me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Take care.
All right, folks. That's our media ambassador, acting SP Christopher Arun there. Once again on the field, just showing, hey, people are busy. And I just like to end, just to reinforce a point. It's everything is about survival, not winning. That's why the police recommend things like the cameras and the neighborhood watches and the lights and so on and so on. That's why perhaps you should always consider, hey, are my locks good enough? Are my doors secure enough, right? What else can I do? And maybe you don't have a whole set of money in the world to put a big steel cage around your house. But maybe you could look into, well, what little things could I do and again, I understand a locked door ain't going to permanently stop anybody that is determined to break into your house. Hence the term breaking in. But the idea is, if your family is in the home and you will then have reasonable fear that you and your family could be harmed, it's about buying as much time until hopefully police can arrive or the neighbors get aware and alarm bells are ringing and sounding. Even if you don't have an alarm, an actual alarm, rhetorically speaking, heightened sense of awareness. Everybody is now aware of what's going on. Buy you time to get the word out, to hopefully get a police response. Buy you time to, if necessary, get your kids out. Get your wife out, your elderly relatives out, right? Because part of it is, I guess, and we don't have time, unfortunately, are they here to invade your home, to steal from you? Are they here, like with that lady from Central or Barataria, I can't remember where she was successfully rescued by the Coast Guard and suspects of a kidnapping ring was taken. You don't know what they're there for. So this is the unfortunate, difficult position that citizens, that civilians are in. It is a dynamic situation that has many variables, and most of us, we're not going to be anywhere close to prepared enough to know what to do perfectly in these kind of situations. You could only prepare as much as you possibly can, right? And then it just comes down to hoping that people pull through for you. So like the ASP said, don't be the hermit in the neighborhood. Try to reach out to your neighbors. Try to have some kind of relationship. Even if it's just a friendly wave, some kind of acknowledgement. They might not know you or your life story. You might not know them and their life story. But at least they're not going to look at you and say, we don't want to have anything to do with that person. You know, and the thing is, look, there might be time periods where you are not entirely sure where the law, what the limits of the law are. And you have to now make judgment calls. And I'm not saying no, but it's just one of those things where the more knowledge you have up front, the better off you can be. And I myself, I haven't really been involved in any serious violent confrontations. I've been in school fights, and even then it wasn't much of anything, right? But you need to put some thought into this, and you need to understand that if you are looking to defend yourself beyond just having locked doors and passive things like that, the moment you opt into a violent confrontation in any capacity, that could cause escalation. So you can't do half measures now. You can't shoot at people and not be prepared to hit them if necessary. Not be prepared to shoot them directly if they look to charge you, even if they have nothing in their hand. You can't do half-baked attempt at self-defense. And unfortunately, in the past, the most effective advice would be to just surrender and give them what they want, because that's how things were back then. Now it's not so clear. So perhaps there shouldn't be a price on security. If you could do it, maybe you should look to do it. We have had various situations in our home where we had to add to the security of the home, because sometimes we learned lessons the hard way, whether it was burglaries, whether it was at the end of a gun. So no one is immune to crime, and perhaps that is the most important thing. Don't assume that it can't happen to you. Give yourself every chance. All right, no calls today. We're out of time. So I'll just say thanks to the ASP for joining me once again. I don't think we have any comments. Do we have any comments? You can throw it up on the screen quick. I can't read them. All right, good day. I understand that the condition the U.S. is imposing on regional countries is that in return for U.S. private investment, the country must collaborate with the Zionist genocidal state of Israel. Also, such countries must produce a private investment protection law that gives immunity to private investors against any legal action against them and be free of being nationalized. The first condition has already been accomplished. Let's see if the second is implemented. The thing about free of being nationalized, I think that's reasonable, especially given what happened with Venezuela. I mean, we wouldn't want our own assets to be confiscated by the state. Ironically, you have a situation in New York where that kind of talk about confiscating private property is being said by the team of the New York's mayor and his political allies, right? But generally speaking, that's what happened in Venezuela. Private investment money came, and then the state said, it's ours. Is that right? Now, it could be the case where, all right, say you have ExxonMobil makes a bad deal. The state, I think, could potentially tell ExxonMobil, listen, we don't like this deal. Now, there should be some right to renege the deal, but then that doesn't mean you're going to be free from consequences. So things have to be proportional. But to say you're going to nationalize someone else's assets, I don't have a problem with them demanding protections against that. Now, that said, if a government wanted to do it, they could just rescind the law, I would imagine. But still, having some sort of guarantee against that, I don't have a problem. Now, are they demanding collaboration with Israel? That I don't know. I think our collaboration with Israel is due to what is in our best interests as determined by the government of the day. Because Israel might be willing to play ball with certain quid pro quos on the security front and sales of certain technologies that maybe other countries aren't, or maybe they're offering the best price. I don't know, right? But this is the real world. And we need to be clear about something. When the IDF was attacking Gaza, Egypt didn't open its borders. None of the rest of the Middle East opened their borders to the citizens of Gaza. everybody in that region said they will stay right there, which is an indirect approval. Yeah, they publicly might decry it, but the point is they did nothing themselves to stop it. Egypt could have let them in. I believe history does say that when certain groups from Palestine was brought into other Muslim countries, the revolutionary attitude did not sit well with the locals, to say the least. So to say that it is quite that straightforward, it's not that simple. What is going on with Israel in the Middle East is not that simple. I understand that that's what the narrative on the internet will tell you, and that's what the news media will tell you, but the fact of the matter is, Palestinians are not getting certain types of help or consideration from other Muslims in that part of the world, regardless of how much those countries might say they disagree with Israel. So the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, why? It's similar to what I said about earlier. You can't want public servants to get more money and then complain when the money comes from. They're telling you that they disagree with it, but they're not doing anything about it themselves. They want you to do something about it, because they don't want to do anything about it themselves. And they don't have to fight Israel. They could just take the refugees. They could just take the refugees. But they don't want to do it. Right? Immunity to private investors against any legal action against them, that's different. That's different. On some level, if they do anything wrong that's illegal here, they should be subject to our laws here. But I believe, and I don't know how long this will last, but America is trying to position themselves on multiple levels of only we could prosecute our people. Now, I think that is also not so simple, because not every foreign nation is like Trinidad and Tobago. I think we can be, to some extent, trusted to prosecute a foreign national if they break the law here, and the way how the laws are set up, that is the proper procedure. Not every foreign country is like that. Not every country in this region, I think, is potentially like that. Unfortunately, we might have to suffer for being categorized in a general oversimplified thing. Do you know for some North American companies, we are basically Trinidad and Tobago classified as Latin American. So when they send promotional material, we get it in Spanish. So we might be paying the price of just being lumped together with. And it probably does not help that we have things like state agencies and army helping the police, and the ambassador candidate saying, hey, I don't know how things look in here. I'll go check it out on the ground, but it's not looking good. Because then we kind of start to look like some of these other Latin American countries where corruption is even more widespread. And I think part of it is for that. When you have judges and prosecutors being compromised, because we know that they're assassinated, so to say that they're not being compromised in certain other countries, that would be a naive assumption. When they can be compromised, whether it's threat of death or bribes or what have you, then I could see where American nationals would have been, or the criminal justice system of certain countries could be weaponized against foreign nationals. Now, we could make a case for ourselves, and maybe for countries like Barbados, Grenada, and most of CARICOM, etc., etc. But let's not assume that everything that we go through, other countries in the Western Hemisphere goes through, and they're just like us, and we're exactly the same, and the circumstances are exactly the same. It's not. We don't have cartels like how Mexico and Colombia has cartels. And we just as easily could. So let's ourselves not try to generalize things and oversimplify them and assume that it's always apples to apples. It's not. Right? If we want to complain that, hold on, you don't need those protections here. The flip side is where we are concerned about those same cartels having influence here. We have our own prime minister saying that the other political party, right, they get some of their political financing, campaign financing, from individuals connected to drug money. So politically, half of the government could be compromised. And that's assuming that there's no suspicions on the UNC by the Americans as well. It is alleged that certain ministers of national security or national security type portfolios, there are suspicions that the Americans have of them. So the protection laws that they want to put in place could be a generalization that we are being unfairly lumped into, or it could be something specific with regards to us and our political setup and our political landscape. It doesn't help when they tried to charge Christmas lists with sedition. Just saying. And yes, you might say, well, the PNM did that. Time out. Let's not make naive assumptions that governments, foreign governments, are going to care who's in power in what moment. To North America, to the Canadians and the Americans, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, the criminal justice system of Trinidad and Tobago, charged a YouTuber, the last in the line of multiple YouTubers with sedition because of a YouTube video. Just saying. So, I'm not saying that you're wrong for what you typed, but there might be a lot more details underneath it. Do we have any other comments? That's it. All right. So I'm probably way over time with that. So with that said, thanks to the commenter as well. It's a good comment though. It's an important topic, multiple facets or multiple topics that they themselves have multiple facets to discuss. And you might not be content with what I just said. We could maybe go further, but of course, you know, let's try and be reasonable. We might reach a point where I'm at my limit, but that's my stance on it for now. Anyone else, maybe tomorrow or some other day, you could make a comment or call in and have your say on those things because it's pertinent, because it speaks to the potential future that we are going headfirst into, one way or the other. We don't necessarily know how it's all going to shake out at the end, though. Hopefully it's not bad, because I don't think we could survive any more bad economic news right now. But it is what it is. ExxonMobil, I know Karen would have a lot of concerns with that company being brought up and brought into TNT. So perhaps that's where the commenter, you know, the commenter's concerns are not totally unfounded, at the very least with regards to that. Stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. As the head of the Communication Workers Union said, don't get so tied up with your political allegiances. As I said yesterday, you need to start to consider, are you loyal to your nation and to the society of the democracy by which you say you are a part of, or are you loyal to your party first? Your answer should be very telling to yourself on your character or what your beliefs are. And maybe you might need to change them in order to look yourself in the mirror. I don't know. It's nice to be nice, even when the world is not nice. I guess it's even more important for us to try to practice that as best we can. But I don't have unrealistic expectations for us. There's always so much good news, huh? Always so much happy news in the news cycles. I dream of a day when less interesting things will be taking place and I'll have less to talk about. But until then, we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN. Good day, and you are watching another episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Donowa, attorney at law, and once again I'm happy to bring the law and you. So today we have a very packed program dealing with legal aid. How does Legal Aid and Advisory Authority pursue access to justice? And I have two guests in studio who are the Chief Public Defender